America's Secret Destiny, Part 3 of 4. This is James Madison, the fourth President of the United States. He has been called the father of the Constitution during the deliberations on this document. He, along with Alexander Hamilton and John Jay, were asked to write a series of articles for a newspaper in New York City as an effort to explain the type of government they were creating. These essays have been published as the Federalist Papers so we can know what our founding fathers were thinking as they wrote the Constitution. And Mr. Madison discussed the delegated powers in Article 1, Section 8 with these words. The powers delegated by the proposed Constitution to the federal government are few and defined. Those which are to remain in the state government are numerous and indefinite. So Madison was saying that the only powers the United States has are few and defined, meaning they have to be listed. And if they're not listed, the United States does not have them. And to put the final argument to Madison's position, I would like to quote the 10th Amendment to the Constitution once again. It reads, the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution are reserved to the states or the people. So Congress only has delegated powers, or in the words of James Madison, these powers are few and defined. But Congress has funded the following items: stem cell research, space capsules, Hubble space telescopes, and trips to the moon, amongst other things. Where is the delegated power to do each of these things? If the Constitution does not specifically say Congress shall have the power to tax the people for stem cell research, Congress does not have the power to fund stem cell research. How could the Founding Fathers ever conceived of such a thing as stem cell research back in 1787? And the answer is that they couldn't, and if they couldn't, they didn't. And if they didn't, then Congress doesn't. But Congress has. So that means that Congress must know that they have unlimited power. They must know they have the power to legislate in all cases whatsoever. So they must know that they should never tell the American people they have this unlimited power. So just pay your taxes, and pay your taxes, and pay your taxes, and pay your taxes. And just hope that they leave you enough money to live on. Because they have the power to tax everything that you earn. Because you voluntarily gave them that power. Thank you, Ben Franklin, for your words to deceive. Thank you, Founding Fathers, for the power to legislate in all cases whatsoever. Thank you, Masons, Order of the Quest, and of the Illuminati, for your ability to conceal the truth from us. I would now like to continue the idea that the Constitution was granted unlimited power to Congress. This is a rather poor quality photograph of Howard Freeman, who was, in my opinion, this nation's greatest constitutional authority. I had the pleasure of having met him several times out on the lecture circuit or at a summer camp. He once came to my hometown of Tucson to speak to a club that I was a member of, and his host invited me to his home to meet with other guests and talk with Mr. Freeman. He told us two stories from his personal experience that I would like to retell now because they are extremely pertinent to the study of America's secret destiny. Mr. Freeman told us that he was asked to testify as an expert witness in the case of a friend of his who had stopped paying income taxes because he did not think he was legally obliged to do so. This friend of his was charged with willful failure to file. When Mr. Freeman was on the stand, he was asked to cite various Supreme Court decisions that provided the evidence that this defendant did not have to pay income taxes. Mr. Freeman said that he was elated that he was able to get these decisions into the court record. When Mr. Freeman completed his testimony and the trial had ended, the judge spoke to the jury. I don't know if that's the real judge or not, but that might have been, before they were dismissed to reach a verdict. The judge told the jury, "You are to completely ignore the testimony of Howard Freeman." Mr. Freeman was shocked, and he left the courtroom to meet with the judge as he was going into his office. He asked the judge, "By what authority do you overturn the standing decisions of the United States Supreme Court?" And the judge replied, "Those were old decisions prior to 1938. And Mr. Freeman said, "Those are standing decisions. They have not been overturned. I do not care how old they are. You have no right to overturn a standing decision of the United States Supreme Court in a lower district court." Mr. Freeman then asked the judge what had happened in 1938. The judge said that he had already told Mr. Freeman too much and that he wasn't going to tell him anymore. He ended their conversation by walking into the room so that Mr. Freeman could no longer question him. Mr. Freeman then went to a law library to see if he could find a Supreme Court decision dealing with this issue. And he found the Erie Railroad versus Tompkins case of the 1938 Supreme Court. For the purist who wants to read the case, it is found on page 64 of the October term 1937, Syllabus 304 U.S. Certiorari to the Circuit Court, I don't know how to pronounce that, Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit, number 367, argued January the 31st, 1938, decided April 25th, 1938, and there's the case on the right side of this screen. The case consists of 4 paragraphs in sequence, and the third one reads as follows. There is no federal general common law. And it now becomes important to discuss what the common law is, and I'll make it brief since I am not an expert on the subject. The simplest explanation of the common law is this: man is only guilty of harm if he damages another person's property or injures his person, which means there is no damage unless someone or something is injured. The Constitution used to be this nation's common law, but according to this judge, the Supreme Court ruled that the Constitution was no longer the supreme law of the land. Mr. Freeman then told us that a short time later he met a retired state Supreme Court justice who told him that they needed to talk. When the two of them met, the judge told him that he was a retired state of Wyoming Supreme Court justice who had been appointed to that position while he was a federal judge in Wyoming. He then asked Mr. Freeman not to reveal his identity because he could, quote, get into a lot of trouble, end quote, by revealing too much. Mr. Freeman agreed that he would not ever reveal his name in any of his discussions of the proceedings in the courts of America. And the judge told him this story. In 1938, notice the year, 1938, all the higher federal judges the top attorneys and the U.S. attorneys were called into a secret meeting by President Franklin Roosevelt, who recalled to their attention that in 1933 he had suspended the redemption of our gold certificates in gold. This is a sample of a gold certificate. You will notice that America's money used to have a promise to redeem the paper certificate in gold with these words as shown in the red rectangle. This is to certify that there is on deposit in the Treasury of the United States of America $100 in gold, payable to the bearer on demand. What this means is that the possessor of a gold certificate could take it into a bank and request that value shown on the certificate in gold. He could ask for it, and that the bank would provide the holder with that amount of gold on demand. But in 1933, President Roosevelt suspended this requirement to allegedly assist in controlling the after effects of the great stock market crash of 1929. In other words, the American people could no longer get their gold for their gold certificates. This was a contract of the United States government with the holder that they could obtain their gold for their certificate anytime they wanted. Notice that this phrase does not say subject to revocation on the whim of a president. America was revoking a standing contract by no longer honoring the terms of that contract. Roosevelt then went on to explain the international bankers who own America's national debt had declared that the suspension of the redemption clause on our money was an act of a bankrupt nation. The president was admitting that the nation was now totally owned by the international bankers. And as the new managers of this nation, they could set the rules and regulations under which we lived. Roosevelt was telling these judges that the international bankers had decided that they as judges could no longer adjudicate cases on the Constitution of the United States, the supreme law of the land. They were to use the Uniform Commercial Code as the new supreme law of this land, with one exception. Roosevelt told the judges and the attorneys that they had to take silent judicial notice of the fact that the Constitution was null and void and that we were living under a new set of laws called the Uniform Commercial Code. That meant, in language that only judges and presidents and attorneys understand, you cannot tell the dummies. You must use language that makes it sound like it is coming from a constitution, but it isn't. But whatever you do, never tell the people of America. And ever since 1938, they have succeeded with only a few exceptions. And to show you that, in my opinion, the current Congress knows they have the unlimited power of the grant to legislate in all cases whatsoever, and that they must not tell the American people that the Constitution is null and void. Let me illustrate the point by bringing up the case of Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House. She was asked where she got the authority to even consider legislation that would remake the nation's healthcare system. And she answered, from the power to regulate interstate commerce. Now let me point out that Congress did grant that specific power in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3 of the Constitution. It reads, Congress shall have the power to regulate commerce among the several states. But here is the question. If Congress has had the power since the Founding Fathers gave it to them, Why did Congress wait until the year 2009, over 200 years later, to consider legislation to remake the healthcare system? Madison did say that the powers were few and defined, and I must admit the Commerce Clause words are not defined by the Constitution itself. However, Alexander Hamilton, in Federalist Paper number 22, did discuss what they meant by the phrase. He wrote, "The interfering regulations of some states have given just cause of complaint to other states, and it is to be feared that examples of this nature, not restrained by a national control," meaning some sort of power being given to Congress to regulate interstate commerce, "would be multiplied till they become injurious impediments to the intercourse between different states." Putting that language into today's terms, he meant Congress was giving the power to protect commerce between states when one state might be causing problems for shipments across their state borders. And now again, I must ask, why did Congress decide on remaking the nation's healthcare system over 200 years after they were deemed to have received that power? And the answer is simply that the Founding Fathers knew what those words meant and that it did not give them this power. And the evidence lies in the answer to the question. Has America been plagued by frequent disputes between various states about medical care? And I would think you would have to agree that we have not experienced this in the past. Secondly, let me be so bold as to ask the Congresswoman, is the Commerce Clause the authority to pass legislation funding trips to the moon, space telescopes, space satellites, stem cell research, and any other purpose not known to the Founding Fathers? Because none of those powers were granted to Congress either. And it is very obvious to conclude that she is not telling the truth when she makes this claim, because she must know about the power to legislate in all cases whatsoever given to her in the U.S. Constitution. But she still has been instructed to not tell the American people. In other words, she has been instructed to take silent judicial notice of this fact. So she makes up this absurd claim to cover the fact that she simply cannot tell the American people the truth. And I will explain why this legislation is being considered and quite likely will pass towards the end of this presentation. But suffice it to say that I believe that Congress does know that they have the unlimited power of Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17, the power to legislate in all cases whatsoever. In other words, they have the power to do whatever they jolly well want to do. Yes, the sign on the podium in front of the Congresswoman tells us what she believes in: a new direction for America. Congresswoman Pelosi believes in a broad power to do whatever she and the majority of the Congress wants under the Commerce Clause. Apparently she had never read this quotation from Thomas Jefferson, the principal author of the Declaration of Independence and the third President of the United States. This is what he said about the Constitution and her liberal interpretation of the Commerce Clause. Free government is founded in jealousy and not in confidence. It is jealousy which prescribed limited constitutions to bind down those whom we are obliged to trust with power. That our Constitution our Constitution has accordingly fixed the limits to which and no further our confidence may go. In questions of power then, Let no more be said of confidence in man, but bind him down from mischief by the chains of the Constitution. It seems to me that Jefferson was certainly a champion of delegated powers, meaning that Congress has only very specific powers. To bind Nancy Pelosi down from mischief by the chains of the Constitution. But of course, Nancy Pelosi knows more than James Madison and Thomas Jefferson. I will say this: if we allow Nancy Pelosi to extend the power of government into every corner of American life under the Commerce Clause, we will surely have a new direction for America. Next, I would like to provide you with some evidence that my contentions, additional evidence that my contentions are correct. First of all, I would like to include parts of a letter I received in August of 2009 from a practicing attorney in the United States. I shall not name this attorney because I will protect his privacy, and because I am certain his fellow attorneys would not appreciate his putting these thoughts into writing. He was responding to an appearance I made on a talk show in his area, wherein I discussed the Supreme Court decision that totally eliminated the Constitution and the common law. I then discussed the evidence that we were living under the Uniform Commercial Code. This is how he described himself. I am an attorney and I've been practicing for 14 years. And I am licensed in 3 states. And have actually been blessed with the opportunity to be involved in cases all over the United States. He then wrote this: I enjoy and applaud your work. I've come to the same conclusions on most issues so far. And to some degree, I am still working on it. And then he added this comment: I've heard this argument many times that there is a big secret underlying the modern court system, which is actually a uniform commercial court. And the lawyers and judges guard the secret, like they were part of some secret society. And that if you say the magic words or indicate that you know the secret, the judges and lawyers will know that you are on to their big secret, and you will be given special treatment. So once we tell the truth, it is no longer a big secret, and I just did. Let me give you one more bit of evidence that the Constitution is null and void and that the Supreme Court knows this. This is, of course, Barack Obama, recently elected President of the United States. And this is a picture of the President with his mother. And this is a picture of the young President with his father. A citizen of Kenya, a nation on the eastern side of Africa. And this is the future president in a picture taken in Kenya. He is the second man from the left in the back row, as shown in the red rectangle. The woman in the bright yellow dress is Barack Obama's grandmother, the mother of Barack's father. She has been quoted as saying that Barack was born in Kenya, and that claim has been substantiated by his half-brother and his half-sister. Now this poses a real problem. The Constitution of the United States says this about the qualifications of the President. This is how Article 2, Section 1 of the Constitution reads. No person, please notice the word is person, no person except a natural-born citizen shall be eligible to the office of President. And those 2 words, natural-born, means that the person has to be born inside the 50 states of the United States of America. Therefore, if Mr. Obama was born in Kenya, he is a citizen of Kenya, and since he was not born in America, he cannot be president. And Philip Berg, an attorney from Pennsylvania, has filed a motion in the Supreme Court of the United States in 2008 asking them to decide if Barack Obama is constitutionally eligible to become president. I was able to call in during a radio talk program prior to the inauguration of Mr. Obama in January of 2009 when Mr. Berg was a guest of that host. And I told Mr. Berg that I wanted to thank him for his attempt to ask the Supreme Court to declare that Barack Obama could not be inaugurated as president. And then I told him that the Supreme Court would not give him any answer ever. And that the reason was because the Supreme Court knew that the Constitution was declared null and void in 1938 by the Erie Railroad versus Tompkins case. And that the Supreme Court, like all courts in this nation, has taken silent judicial notice of that fact. It is now December the 28th, 2009, and the Supreme Court has still not issued an opinion as to whether or not Barack Obama is constitutionally eligible to be president. And Barack Obama remains in office. It is my opinion that this reluctance of the Supreme Court in nearly a year to afford Mr. Berg an opinion is further evidence that the Constitution of the United States is null and void, and that the Supreme Court knows that, and that they too have taken silent judicial notice of that fact. And as I have already said, they will never issue an opinion. Now let me briefly explain what the Uniform Commercial Code is. It is called the law of contract. It changes everything in America to a contract, and since two-party contracts have to be agreed by both parties, neither party can force the other into a contract. This is the reason that they cannot force us into any contract without our consent. Now this posed a problem for the international bankers because they knew the courts will declare any contract where one party forces another into signing it null and void. And the reason is that forcing someone into a contract against their will is called involuntary servitude and is in violation not only of the Constitution but of the Uniform Commercial Code as well. So they somehow had to make us believe that we had to sign for a contract even when they knew there was no law requiring us to do so. This is called color of law. It sounds like a law, it acts like a law, it has the force of law, but there is no law. Let me explain this in another way. Congress has been given the power to make us believe there is a law when there is no law. Now let me show you how this works. Before I do, I want to explain that this is only a brief review. I am not an attorney, so I cannot give you legal advice. All I am trying to do is cover this story as an historian. I'm relaying information that I believe to be true as a way of educating the American people like any historian does. Now let me start. There is no law requiring any of us sovereign state citizens to get a socialist security card. So they trick us by making us believe that we must get a card when it is a voluntary act. But you say everybody knows that you have to get a socialist security card to get a job in America. But I ask those who make this statement, please show me the law. And no one has ever been able to do that. Now let me ask you to consider this. I am a self-proclaimed honorary citizen of the state of Missouri, which is called the Show Me State. That means to me, if you have something for me to consider, please provide me with some evidence. So I will now try to provide you some evidence that there is no law. And I submit the following two letters as some evidence that there is no law. This is a photocopy of a letter written by a district manager of the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, dated July the 13th, 1979. This is the pertinent statement in that letter. It reads, "The Social Security Administration does not require that you have a Social Security number." Notice that the letter did not say that Congress passed House Bill number so-and-so in 1935 that required all Americans to obtain a Social Security number. If it was law, I would think that they would say exactly that. This is a copy of a January 10th, 1990 letter from a claims representative of the Health and Human Services Department of the U.S. government. And this is the sentence I wish to discuss. It says, Social Security is a voluntary system in that no one is required to get a number. That means to me that we do not have to volunteer to get a number, and that we can only get a number if we volunteer for one. But once we get a Social Security number, we're obligated to use it by contract, because we have become a naturalized citizen who has voluntarily become subject to the most oppressive government ever devised by man. So now we see that the Constitution is null and void, and that each one of us who has a Social Security card is a naturalized citizen of the most powerful government in the history of this world. Now let me return to the Great Seal of the United States. Let's study the hidden symbols using numbers. This is once again the eagle side of the Great Seal, and if you count the feathers on each wing, you would find 32 feathers on its left wing and 33 on its right. And I do not believe that this is a coincidence or an error by the artist. And to assist you in understanding the significance of the two numbers 32 and 33, I would like to explain a little about the Masonic Lodge. Every Mason in America has to go through 3 rituals called degrees, one at a time, and when he is finished, he is called a Master Mason, and a member of the Blue Lodge. He has then 2 options should he wish to go further. He can join the Scottish Rite, shown in green, with 29 more degrees for a total of 32, or he can join the York Rite, shown in yellow, with a total of 10 more for a total of 13. There is a 33rd degree on top of both of these Masonic lodges called the 33rd degree, and it is honorary, and the member must be invited into this degree. There seems to be evidence that this 33rd degree of Scottish Rite runs the entire worldwide Masonic Lodge, so they are extremely important. Now this is the eagle side of the Great Seal of the United States again. Notice that the eagle is looking towards the side with the 33 feathers. So the implication of this drawing is that the 33rd degree of the Scottish Rite of Masonry runs the entire United States, and that this is a secret concealed inside the Great Seal of the United States. I remember in my high school civics class that there was a debate amongst this nation's founding fathers over whether the bald eagle or the American wild turkey should be the national bird of this nation. But my research shows that there was no debate at all. The eagle was always intended to be the national bird from the very beginning, and that the appearance of the debate was a ruse and a scam, another fire engine, or some other grain. In the books written by the key Masonic writers, the Lodge and others will convince the researcher that the eagle was an important symbol of something else. The following are 6 quotes on the subject, 5 of which were written by members of the Masonic Lodge. I will not cite the sources of each quote, but just show you the quotes without attribution. The eagle is a symbol of initiation. The eagle is of great antiquity, a symbol of the sun. The eagle was sacred to the sun. The eagle was a bird consecrated to the sun. The eagle represented the Egyptian sun god, Amun-Ra. And the following quote is one of the explanations as to why the eagle is sacred to sun worship. The eagle is also supposed to be the only creature that can look directly into the sun. Now this is an interesting observation. If a human looks directly into the sun, it is quite likely that this person will go blind. But in this quote, the author was saying that the eagle can look directly into the sun without being harmed. But there is a symbolic and concealed meaning behind this statement. It conceals the symbolic thought that the eagle can get directly to the sun god and that man cannot. This appears to be the concealed meaning behind the symbology of the eagle. The eagle can do something that man cannot do, and early man apparently understood that fact, so he used the eagle as a symbol of the way to reach the sun god. But few Americans, if any, know what all of the symbols on the Great Seal mean. As I have briefly mentioned, the numbers 32 and 33 are significant to the Masonic Lodge, but the numbers show up in some rather interesting concealed locations. This is the symbol of the government of the Communist Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, meaning the old Russia. As you can see, it is a globe with what appear to be wheat stalks on either side, but the semicircle to the bottom appears to be out of place and without a logical explanation, especially when you count the rays protruding from the center, because there are 32 of them. The semicircle, which when completed would be a full circle, meaning that it could be a symbol of the sun, which when added to the 32 rays would total 33. One can only imagine what this Masonic symbol has to do with the Communist Soviet Union. The number appears once again in this, the symbol of the United Nations. First of all, the leaves on each side total 13. Do not count the base, and as shall be discussed later, the number 13 is a significant Masonic number. The globe is divided into 32 divisions, with the circle at the top. It is not complete, presumably because it would intersect with portions of the globe. Another explanation might be that the future world government has not brought the United States and Canada into the circle as of yet, because the circle, if completed, would be over the northern part of North America. And the circle plus the 32 divisions total 33 in the symbol. Once again, the Masonic numbers 32 and 33 are concealed in the symbol of the United Nations. While I am here, I would like to briefly discuss the connection between the numbers 13 and 33. We in America use a system of inches and feet as a measuring system, and a system known as the metric system uses millimeters and centimeters. If you compare a ruler of 13 inches in length side by side with a ruler of 33 millimeters in length, you will notice that the two rulers are the same length. And that is because the metric system was created by the Masons who caused the French Revolution of 1789. So this is one way you can say that 13 is equal to 33, a Masonic way of saying that Satan's number is equal to the number of the 33rd degree Masons who run the entire Masonic system. I would like to show you another concealed connection between the numbers 13 and 33. It is concealed inside the Masonic Lodge. As I said, the Masons have 3 degrees in what they call the Blue Lodge. The first degree Mason is called an entered apprentice, the second is called a fellowcraft, and the third is called a master Mason. The concealed connection is inside the 2 words Master Mason. First of all, the letter M is the 13th letter of the alphabet, and I do not believe that this is another coincidence. Now, if you separate the 2 M's from the 2 words and set them in the next 2 lines like this, and then turn the 2 words sideways, you can see that each M looks like the number 3, and the 2 of them together make them look like the number 33. So there is a concealed 13 and 33 in their choice of the words that describe their 3rd degree inside the Blue Lodge. There is a similar example of a concealed 33 contained in the name of Mickey Mouse, Walt Disney's first cartoon character. Mr. Disney and his brother Roy were members of the Masonic Lodge, and I believe Walt Disney named his initial cartoon character Mickey Mouse because he knew that this name concealed the number 33 in it. The same thing happens when you print the name Mickey Mouse and separate the 2 M letters. And then turn the name and the 2 letters sideways, and you get a concealed 33 in them as well. And notice this, there are 6 letters in the word master and 6 letters in the word Mickey. There are 5 letters in Mason, and there are 5 letters in Mouse. Just another strange coincidence, I am sure. The Masons have been getting a lot of bad press recently, and the Masons are anxious to overcome that with favorable publicity. This is quite likely the reason that Walt Disney released 2 movies that gave a favorable image to the Masonic Lodge. The first one was the movie entitled National Treasure, released in the year 2004. And the second one was entitled Book of Secrets, and it was released in 2007. This is a picture of the room where the Security Council of the United Nations meets. If you count the number of lights in the circle of the ceiling, you would count 32 of them. 32 plus the circle they are in would be 33. Before I explain why the numbers 32 and 33 are significant, let me show you other instances where the numbers show up. This is a drawing of a woman carrying the Olympic torch through a worldwide run to publicize the Olympics to be held a few months later. According to the Olympic Committee, the torch is 32 inches long, and the flame on top would be the 33rd object. This photograph shows how the first torch is lit. The caption underneath the photograph says, Greek actresses dressed as high priestesses go through a dress rehearsal for the lighting of the flame at Olympia. So the flame is not lit by a match, but by the rays of the sun focused through a magnifying disc. So it is the sun god who lights the first torch and is lighted on Mount Olympus, where the Greek gods allegedly reside. Now I would like to start an explanation of why these 2 numbers 32 and 33 are significant and what they symbolically represent and why that is significant in America's history. This drawing shows Quetzalcoatl, a Latin American sun god, possibly descending from heaven on a ladder with 32 rungs. If the place he is coming from is heaven, that would mean the 33rd rung on the ladder. This is an important drawing for reasons that will be discussed later. By the way, that drawing shows that a modern-day rock and roll musician was once worshipped as a god even before he was born. This is a close-up of the guy in the upper left of the main drawing, and it clearly shows that Ringo Starr, the drummer for the Beatles, was once worshipped as a god in Latin America. Now, I'm sorry, that was supposed to be funny, and it wasn't. As I said, Ringo was worshipped way before he was even born, and if you believe me, I would like to sell you some swampland here in Arizona. And this connection will show the connection between the number 32 and the circle representing the sun being the 33rd when it is connected to the number. This is a representation of a Mayan stone cut to represent the sun and its 32 rays. Samuel Morse invented the Morse code in 1842, and that code concealed a use of the number 33. The code uses a dot and a dash, and the dash lasts the equivalent of the time it would take to end 3 dots. This is a photograph of a key used to send the Morse code key, and the key is tapped quickly for a dot and then again for a dash, but the sender waits for the time it would take